Kermit the Frog sure was scary in this book, and I love her twisted, weird world of the Fae. Like, if this series was a food, it would be a cupcake. I vibe with his writing style, I vibe with his humor. This book was terrifying, and you like enemies to lovers like Bestie, you need to check it out. This book is literally my everything. Next up, we have one of my favorite books of the whole entire year, and that is Hi friends! Today I will be sharing with you all of the books that I have read so far this year. That's pretty much it. Okay. My name is Lexi and welcome back to my channel. Today we will be doing a reading wrap up, and I have not done a recent reads or a reading wrap up I feel like in a really long time, and I'm really excited to share with you all of the books that I have read so far this year. I haven't even counted. Let me see how many. Hold on. Okay, if my calculations are correct, there are 16 books that I will be sharing with you today. I'm very excited. But before we go ahead and get started, I would like to thank today's sponsor, which is Native. Hi! Do you enjoy smelling incredible and feeling squeaky clean after every shower? Do you love it when you walk into a room and have people go, "Oh my God, you smell amazing," so that you can then say, "Oh my God, thank you, it's my body wash"? I love it when that happens to me too. And if you're like me and you love smelling incredible thanks to your body wash, you should check out Native. When I look for body washes, I always look for clean and simple ingredients that give off a fresh scent, which is why I love using Native. They use naturally derived ingredients to help cleanse your skin, and their body washes are made with plant-based cleaners. I love that Native's body wash leaves my skin feeling soft and hydrated. I also love their wide range of scents, which range from spicy and woodsy to clean and crisp. There's honestly a scent for everyone. The first body wash I chose was Coastal Oak and Amber, which smells clean and warm. Next, I chose Lilac and White Tea, which smells pretty and delicate. And finally, I also picked Sweet Peach and Nectar, which smells fruity and reminds me of the summertime. And while all of these smell absolutely incredible, my very favorite, I think, happens to be the Sweet Peach and Nectar. And I've been using this non-stop since I've received it. And if you enjoy their body wash, I also highly recommend checking out their other products, such as their hand and body lotions and their deodorants, which I think are incredible. And if you would like to try Native for yourself, you can use my link and code Roselyn2 to get 20% off of your very first purchase. This offer is available site-wide for a limited time, so I highly recommend checking it out and stocking up so that you can save. Thanks again, Native, for sponsoring today's video. All of the links and my code will be down below in my description box, and I highly recommend checking them out. And now, back to the video. Okay, grab yourself something to drink. I have an iced vanilla double espresso. I'm very excited to drink this. I have been looking forward to drinking this literally all day, but I saved it for the video. We want the cozy vibes. Oh my God. Literally, if you just want to add like a sprinkle of happiness to your life, just drink coffee, you know? But yes, grab yourself something to drink and let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so let's start with the last book that I finished, which is Grady Hendrix's How to Sell a Haunted House. And this is considered adult horror. Damn, Kermit the Frog sure was scary in this book. So this book is sort of like a cross between The Muppets meets Chucky meets The Haunting of Hill House. It was equal parts terrifying and absolutely hilarious. This book is following Mark and Louise, who are siblings, and they have to come together after their parents tragically pass away in a car accident. And these siblings are extremely different, so they don't really get along, and it's actually very tense in seeing how they interact and how they come together to try selling their parents' house, which just happens to be haunted, but also is plagued with lots and lots of creepy dolls and puppets. Don't pick this book up if you're not interested in like spooky, scary puppets and dolls, because it's mostly about that and less so about like a traditional haunted house story. I love Grady Hendrix because I feel like he actually takes real life horrors and he turns them into campy versions of those horrors, which I think is a really unique take in the horror genre itself. This particular book is actually discussing family trauma and like generational trauma, and it's done in a very unique and interesting way. I feel like this is a great book if you are interested in something that's gonna be spooky, but also is gonna be really funny, because there were so many moments in this book that I was laughing laughing out loud. I love how Grady Hendrix explores different types of love as well. I feel like you don't really get that in a lot of books. Usually it's just romantic love. However, in My Best Friend's Exorcism, we explored platonic love with that friendship. In The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, we see a mother's love with her children. And then in this particular book, we are exploring sibling love, which is complicated and complex and at times also very messy. And I feel like he does explore this in a very, very unique and interesting way. I know that this book is not going to be for everyone, but honestly, I really, really loved it. At the time, I gave it 4.5 stars, but honestly, the more I sit with this book, the more it leans towards a 5-star. I just really, really love Grady Hendrix. I vibe with his writing style, I vibe with his humor, and I vibe with his particular brand of horror. I also read this, by the way, for Gabby's book club, the Book Troop, and we had such a fun live show with Gavin. So if you're interested in checking that out, I will leave the link down below. We do all do impersonations of one particular puppet in here. So if you would like to know how I sound as a puppet, check out the live show. The next book I read was a cozy murder mystery, and it is Shady Hollow, and this is by Juno Black. This is like Murder, She Wrote, if Murder, She Wrote happened to take place in the 100 Acre Woods and the narrator was Winnie the Pooh. Those are the vibes. So this book is narrated by Vera the Vixen, who is a reporter in this sleepy, shady hollow where nothing bad ever happens. And then one day, a resident is found dead in the pond, and it looks like there is murder afoot. And Vera, who is a reporter, is trying to figure out what exactly happened so that she can report it for her newspaper. I think that the most interesting part of this book was the fact that it was narrated by cute and cuddly little woodland creatures. Like, that was so adorable to me. I feel like this is a great book if you're looking for a cozy time specifically. I enjoyed all of the descriptions of the food. I enjoyed the location. Like, the world building was my favorite part. However, I feel like the cozy murder mystery aspect for me just felt a little bit stale and slightly boring. But I don't think that that's a bad thing, because I feel like this actually would be a great palate cleanser if you're looking for like a cozy, slow, kind of meandering plot. I think I want to explore more books in this series, but I will say it's just a very slow moving series, and the plot twist at the end wasn't necessarily like shocking or exciting or anything, but it was a very cozy and cute world. The next book I read is a YA thriller, and it's called A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This book was terrifying. I was expecting more of like a cozy murder mystery vibe. No, this book straight up scared the shit out of me. And the book is following Pip, and for Pip's senior project, she decides to kind of explore an old murder case that happened in her town where a girl named Andy was actually murdered. She decides to start kind of investigating around all of Andy's old friends and her old teachers, and it's really, really interesting. I feel like the twists at the end were really, really well done. It's a very fun and kind of like silly murder mystery, but it's also very tense and scary. And honestly, I really, really enjoyed it. I think if you're looking for something that's gonna scare you a little bit and it's gonna be a really, really fast-paced thriller, pick this up because I really, really enjoyed it. Next up, I read volumes 2 and 3 of The Witch Hat Atelier, which is a manga series. And honestly, this series is just so charming and wholesome and whimsical. Like, if this series was a food, it would be a cupcake. I won't tell you what volumes 2 and 3 are about because I don't want to spoil volume 1, but we are following a girl named Coco who really, really desperately wishes that she could do magic. She ends up becoming an apprentice of a person who is a witch and teaches Coco how to create magic. And it's just about her being an apprentice with 3 other girls. And it's very, very cute. It's very, very wholesome. It's very, very charming. I feel like it feels very unique actually, because the world building in here is actually so different than anything I've seen thus far. And I really, really appreciated it. If you're looking for just like a cozy and wholesome good time, I think you should check this out. Next up, we have one of my favorite books of the whole entire year, and that is Lost in the Moment and Found by Shauna McGuire. This is part of her Every Heart a Doorway Wayward Children novella series. And every single time I read one of these novellas, like honestly, my heart is just filled with serotonin and happiness. This book does deal with some pretty intense situations, so please check the triggers for this. But we follow Antsy, who runs away from home when her stepdad tries to abuse her, essentially. And she ends up in this shop where lost things show up. And once she is there, she can actually go into different portals so that she can go in and out of different worlds. And we're following her time at this lost and found shop while she tries to find herself. And it's just stunning. Like, the metaphors in this are so beautiful. The world building is incredible. And I actually really, really loved how charming and cozy the shop felt. I just am like a huge fan of Shauna Maguire. This is a book that's quite far in her series. If you've never read this series before, I highly recommend starting with the first book, which is Every Heart a Doorway. It's just a great, great series. It really is. Next up is a literary thriller that I just read, and it is called I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Makkai. And I have some questions for you, Rebecca. Why was this book so long? This book is following Bodhi, and Bodhi is a podcaster and also is going back to be a guest lecture professor at her old preparatory school. And while she was at the preparatory school growing up, her roommate Thalia actually was murdered. And now that Bodhi is back, she decides to have a closer look at this murder case that happened with Thalia and see if the wrong person was maybe put away. I feel like this book tried to tackle a lot of things. It tried to tackle cancel culture, the Me Too movement. It played around a lot with like doubt and with first impressions and with how our backgrounds and our upbringing can kind of like blind us to certain things and also kind of mess with our perceptions of different observations and situations. And I feel like Rebecca Makkai actually had some very interesting things to say about some very nuanced and very like large, complex topics. However, I felt like the book was just too long. And I also just had no desire to learn at all about Bodhi, who's our main character. And I kind of feel like when you have a main character, you have to make them so that they're interesting to learn about. I just wasn't interested in Bodhi. The best part of this book happens at the very end. I feel like Rebecca Makkai really brought together a lot of her themes and things in a very interesting way at the end. And I felt like the plot twists in this were also very interesting. I think if it sounds good to you, you should totally check it out and pick it up, but I do think it was just a little bit too long. Next up, I read The Villa by Rachel Hawkins. And this is a thriller, and this book is following two different perspectives. We are following a group of people in the 70s who were musicians and poets and writers who all stay in this little Italian villa, and then there is a murder that takes place. And then we're also following the perspective of two best friends who are both writers who end up going back to the same villa years and years later to write their books. There are two different like thrillery mystery aspects that are happening in this. The first is that we're trying to figure out like who killed who in this 1970s plot with like all of these musicians and poets and writers. And then we're also trying to find out what secret is between these two best friends. And both of these plots end up kind of coming together as you read it. I feel like Rachel Hawkins did a lot of really interesting things with this book. I liked her mix of different media, like there were emails and passages from books all about the murders that took place in the 70s. We have diary entries. I also really, really enjoyed how there were two different stories that were happening, but I feel like the more interesting one for me personally was the one that took place in the 1970s. I wasn't really as invested in the current one between the two best friends, so I feel like overall it was an okay thriller, but at times I thought it was also a little tiny bit boring. However, the cover of this is absolutely stunning. And next up, I read The Stolen Heir by Holly Black, which is a YA fantasy. I freaking love Holly Black, and I love her twisted, weird world of the Fae. So I was so excited to dive back into this world. This technically takes place after her Cruel Prince series, and if you have not read that and you like enemies to lovers like Bestie, you need to check it out. Anyways, this book is following Seren, and Seren actually was like a changeling, so she thought that she was human, and she was switched at birth with like an actual human. And then we find out later that she is a fairy. She's very scared of like the fairy world, and she doesn't like them because she grew up with humans. And so she ends up running away to the forest. And then years and years later, Prince Oak, who we saw in the Cruel Prince series, actually comes and he asks her for her help. And they kind of go on like this little quest together. It's really easy to kind of spoil certain elements of the plot, so I'm gonna leave it kind of at that. But yeah, we're following basically their relationship and their friendship slash romance as Seren is helping Prince Oak on this epic journey. I thought it was really, really interesting. I know that this is a very divisive book right now, but I actually really, really loved it. I loved the relationship between Prince Oak and Seren. I also really, really just enjoy like the world of Holly Black and all of the fairies. So I personally really, really liked it. I love the Cruel Prince series. I thought this was great. I'm definitely gonna be picking up more books in this series, but that's pretty much it. That's like all I have to say. Next up, I read Frost Heart by Jamie Littler for my book club. If you're interested, by the way, in joining us, all the links will be down below. It is through my Patreon and it is level 1. And I actually asked Gavin to guest co-host with me because I know that this is one of his favorite books of all time. And it was a solid 5-star. Like, this is so good. I really, really enjoyed it and I highly recommend it. We're following Ash, and Ash lives with this village, and the villagers are really, really afraid of song weavers. These are people who have the ability to kind of almost manipulate and connect to nature through song, and they're considered really, really scary because they can connect to like monsters and things like that of this world. And Ash, it turns out, is a song weaver, and he ends up going on this amazing voyage on something called the Frost Heart, and he joins almost like a pirate crew sort of, and it's just a really, really great book about him trying to discover more about himself and his parents and his past, while also trying to kind of belong to his new found family with this crew on this sleigh called the Frost Heart. I thought it was hilarious. I loved all of the characters in here. I love his relationship with his guardian Yeti, and I feel like Jamie Littler sprinkled so many wonderful metaphors and really, really interesting and great topics and themes. So if you're looking for a middle grade that is just super, super well done and very, very well written, I highly recommend checking out Frost Heart. And next, I read another 5-star. That's right, I read Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater, and oh my gosh, this book is literally my everything. So this romance has been described as the perfect combination between Pride and Prejudice and Howl's Moving Castle and Besties. I fully agree with this. I think that this is whimsical, it's romantic, it's sweet. It just like, it honestly has all of my heart. It really, really does. We are following Theodora Ittings, and Theodora has unfortunately lost half of her soul to a fairy when she was quite young. And she and her cousin Vanessa actually go to London because Vanessa is going to be, you know, starting to be courted and things like that in high society. It's kind of like Regency romance, except there's magic involved as well. And they both end up going to London. And while they're both in London, they both decide to ask Elias for his help. He's like the Lord Sorcier or Sorcerer of London, and he happens to know a lot about magic, and he's very interested in Theodora and her curse with this fairy. There is a ton more in this book that is actually not talked about in the synopsis, so I don't want to mention it here because I feel like it's going to be a bit of a spoiler, but I felt like there were so many beautiful themes and so many really, really touching and gorgeous messages in here. If you love a romance that packs a big punch and is also like a fully fleshed out fantasy as well, I think you will love this book. It's also a clean romance. I know I get asked all the time, like, are there any Fade to Black romances or romances that maybe aren't as steamy? And if that is you, I think you should check this out. One of the most romantic books I've ever read in my life. I loved it so much. The next romance I want to talk about is an equal favorite, and it is That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon. This book was so freaking good. Now, technically, I actually read this for free on Kindle Unlimited, but the last time I mentioned this, a lot of people said that they actually could not download it. I just looked, and I think it's being traditionally published, so now I think you have to wait to read it, which is kind of a bummer because I found it on Kindle Unlimited and I loved it so much, but I don't think that you can read it anymore. Like, I think it's coming out later under a publishing house. But let me tell you about it anyways. We're following Cinnamon, and Cinnamon is a spice farmer, and she's coming back one day from this like big festival when she sees a man who is in trouble and he needs help. And she's super, super drunk. She decides to try to help him, and lo and behold, he's actually a demon. A lot of things happen. They end up kind of going on this big adventure together, and she ends up helping him. And then while they are on this adventure, they fall in love, and romance happens, and chaos happens. This is a spicy good time, okay? If you're looking for like really, really good steamy scenes, I mean, like, I loved it, okay? It was good. The next romance that I read was 7 Days in June, and this is by Tia Williams. This is a romance, but it also is very complex in the story. I feel like there is a lot to this book, and there are a lot of layers to this book, and there's also a lot of triggers in this book. Before you pick this up, I highly, highly recommend checking the triggers list, because if you can think it, it's probably in this book. However, this book was so well done. It was so touching, it was so beautiful, and it was so romantic. And I do highly, highly recommend it. So this book is following Eva and Shane. And Eva and Shane met when they were very, very young, and they had a brief, passionate affair. And then years later, they both became very successful writers. But here's the thing. Each of them are basically writing the other one into their books. And so throughout the years, both of them are actually writing to the other one, using their books to kind of communicate, if that sort of makes sense. And then years and years later, they meet in New York and they get a second chance at love. It is everything, okay? It is everything. It is smart, it is sexy, it is funny. The heat, the romance, the passion, it's all in here. It's also super, super heartbreaking. There are so many really sad and horrific events that happen in here that are really hard to get through, but you root for these characters so much and you just want them to be together. And I feel like there were so many layers to this book. It was just so fantastic. Again, there are quite a few triggers, so I highly recommend checking it out before diving into the book, but I just really, really loved it and I highly recommend it. The next book I read was a little novella, and it's called The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nie Vo. We're actually being recounted all of the tales from a character called Rabbit. And Rabbit was sold to the palace when she was very, very young because her parents needed the money, and Rabbit becomes the handmaiden to the Empress. And this entire book is sort of like an allegory for an imperialist China, sort of, kind of. Technically, it says a young royal from the far north is sent south for a political marriage in an empire reminiscent of imperial China. And we're kind of following the Empress's journey as she navigates the politics of the empire with Rabbit by her side. I thought it was really unique and super interesting, and at times very sad. Next up, I read a short story collection by Kate Folk called Out There. And this is a speculative, somewhat sci-fi type of collection, and it was really, really, really good. The book itself is following different characters and how they interact with these very weird speculative elements. The first one, for example, is about a girl who ends up trying to avoid dating these things called blots, which look like real men, but the men are too good to be true, and they actually end up stealing her DNA and then like poofing into a cloud of lavender. Which I think is so interesting. There are so many different styles in this particular short story collection that I loved, and I gave quite a few 5 stars. I gave Out There 5 stars. I gave The Last Woman on Earth 5 stars. I gave Heart Seeks Brain 5 stars. My favorite one out of the whole thing was probably The Turkey Rumble. I also read a book in here called Moist House. And it's absolutely as gross as it sounds. So if you're looking for a wild, weird, interesting time and you love speculative short stories, I think you should pick this up. I just thought it was really, really smart. I thought it was really, really clever. And it's actually one of the strongest short story collections I've read in years. It's also kind of re-sparked my love for short stories. So I don't know, I highly recommend this if you are looking for a weird and wild good time. And finally, the very last book that I read was Keeper of Enchanted Rooms, which I actually read on my Kindle, and I think it's on Kindle Unlimited. And this particular book is following Merritt, and Merritt has just inherited this house. But when he goes there, he finds that the house is magical and it is not letting him escape. And this actually gets the attention of someone called Hulda, who works for a magical bureau of enchanted and magical houses. And she has to go to preserve the house and teach Merritt how to work with his new magical house. And it's a little bit of a fantasy, a little bit of a cozy mystery, because we are trying to figure out what secrets the house is keeping. And so Merritt is trying to figure out all of the backstory behind this house, but he's also kind of developing a little bit of a relationship with Hulda. There's also a secondary plot that is much more prevalent in the text itself, but it's not really listed on the summary, and I don't want to spoil anything. If it sounds interesting, I think you should read it. I feel like it was super, super cozy. It was super, super charming. And actually there were quite a few scary moments in here as well. This is considered, I think, an adult cozy mystery, cozy fantasy. I really liked it. I thought it was really, really cute. I think overall it was like a 4-star read and I really enjoyed it. And I think, you guys, that's it. Those are all of the books that I have read so far this year. I would love to know down below, what is your favorite book that you have read this year? Please let me know, and let me know if I should check it out as well. And before we go, a huge thank you once again to Native for sponsoring today's video. Once again, a huge thank you to Native for sponsoring today's video. I highly recommend checking them out if you are looking for a new body wash in your life. And if you're interested in trying out Native for yourself, you can always use my code, which is Rosalind2, and check out the link down below in my description. I'd also like to give a huge, huge thank you to all of my lovely Patreons. If you're interested in joining my Patreon, where you can join 2 exclusive book clubs, have movie nights, join our awesome Discord, have weekly reading sprint live shows, gain access to bonus exclusive videos that no one else on YouTube will see, and also have access to our seasonal and monthly readathons, you should check it out. All the links will be down below in my description. And a big, big thank you to my Ink and Quill Club members, who are all the executive producers of every single video that I make. And if you have made it to this point in the video, please leave me some kind of like a food emoji, because all I'm thinking about right now is lunch. And I think that's it. So until next time, book lovers, keep your head in the clouds and your heart in a book, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye.
Always think of you when spring comes, like it's something in the air at that time. Don't know why. Always dream of you when spring comes. It's like the heat on my skin takes me back to the time met you on